How are you guys doing? Today is Monday, October 18th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to review all the Elite matchups and performances that took place yesterday on Sunday, October 17th. Just to take a quick look of where we are in the season, the WNBA season is completely over as the NBA season is right around the corner and college basketball is going to follow that. Taking a look at what's going on with baseball, there are still there are 4 teams now left competing for the World Series right now, as both teams are in their league championship series. And then, of course, football is underway within America and, of course, outside as soccer is getting underway, as, of course, yesterday was Sunday, so there was a lot of domestic football. Taking a look at first what was going on with the WNBA. Yesterday was Game 4 of the WNBA Finals between the 6th seed Chicago Sky and the 5th seed Phoenix Mercury. The Chicago Sky came into this matchup leading the series 2-1, and after beating the Mercury 80-74, they were able to capture the WNBA title. This is the first WNBA title that the Chicago Sky have won as a franchise. And taking a quick look into what happened in this game for the Phoenix Mercury in their final matchup of the 2021 season, they were led in scoring by their starting center, Brittany Griner. She finished with 28 points and 7 rebounds in 38 minutes as she shot 12 for 19 from the field and a perfect 4 for 4 from the line. For the Chicago Sky, their leading scorer was their starting guard out of DePaul, Allie Quigley. Allie Quigley would finish with 26 points and 5 rebounds in 37 minutes as she shot 9 for 14 from the field and 5 for 10 from 3. Their future Hall of Famer, Candace Parker, would finish with 16 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 steals in 35 minutes as she shot 5 for 11 from the field, 2 for 5 from 3, and a perfect 4 for 4 from the line. Like I said, with this win, the Sky have now won the series 3-1 in this best-of-5 series. The big difference in this game was the fourth quarter. The Chicago Sky came in trailing by 9. They had to outscore Phoenix by 15 in order to win this game by 6. Coming into the quarter, they were effectively trailing 54-65. Just to get a sense of 63-55 or 63-54, if that was the score. And then the Chicago Sky would come from behind and pick up a very big win. That would be the last game of the 2021 NBA season. And of course, I'm going to follow this up with a championship profile for the Chicago Sky. Taking a look at what's going on with the MLB playoffs as we transition off the WNBA. Yesterday was Game 3 of the American League Championship Series in Boston. Yesterday a couple days ago, they were traveling while the NLCS had its Game 2. Coming into this matchup, the series was tied up at 1, and the Boston Red Sox would beat the Astros 12-3 yesterday to take a 2-1 series lead at home. Taking a look at how this went down, the Boston Red Sox scored their first 6 runs of the game in the bottom of the second. An RBI single from Christian Vasquez put the Red Sox up 1-0. Christian Arroyo's RBI fielder's choice made it 2-0. Kyle Schwarber would hit a grand slam to make it 6-0. So that's the second inning. In the bottom of the third, Christian Vasquez's second RBI single of the day would put the Red Sox up 7-0. Christian Arroyo would hit a 2-run home run to make it 9-0 through 3 innings. In the top of the fourth, Kyle Tucker would hit a 3-run home run to shorten the Astros deficit to 6. JD Martinez would hit a 2-run home run in the bottom of the 7th to make the game 11-3. And then Rafael Devers would hit a solo home run in the bottom of the 8th to make it 12-3 and give the Red Sox the lead in the series. For the Houston Astros in this matchup, the loss went to their starting pitcher, Jose Urquidy. He allowed 6 runs in 1.2 innings. He would strike out a batter before getting pulled in the second inning. With this loss, he's 0-1. In the Astros batting lineup, their first baseman and American League batting champ, Yuli Gurriel, would go 2 for 3. Kyle Tucker, their right fielder, would go 1 for 2 with 3 RBIs and a run as he hit his first home run of the playoffs. For the Boston Red Sox, the win would go to their starting pitcher, Eduardo Rodriguez. Eduardo Rodriguez would allow 3 earned runs off of 5 hits in 6 innings as he struck out 7. With this win, Eduardo Rodriguez is 1-0 in the playoffs. In the Red Sox batting lineup, their first baseman Kyle Schwarber went 1 for 4 with 4 RBIs and a run. As of course, he hit a grand slam in the second. That was his first home run of the playoffs. Their center fielder Kike Hernandez went 2 for 4. Their all-star third baseman Rafael Devers went 1 for 4 with an RBI and 2 runs. He hit his second home run of the playoffs. Their elite designated hitter, J.D. Martinez, would end up going 2 for 3 with 2 RBIs and 2 runs. He hit his second home run of the playoffs. Their catcher, Christian Vasquez, would go 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs and 2 runs. And then their second baseman, Christian Arroyo, will go 1 for 4 with 3 RBIs and 2 runs, as Arroyo hit his first home run of the playoffs. With this win, the Red Sox now hold a 2-1 series lead over the American League West champs Houston Astros. Game 4 of this matchup will take place today in Boston, and Game 3 of the National League Championship Series will take place in LA as the Atlanta Braves lead that series 2-0. Taking a look at what's going on with football as, of course, we navigate through this week one day at a time. Yesterday was the 6th Sunday of the NFL season. Starting off in Jacksonville to take a look at what was going on there. The Jacksonville Jaguars took on the Miami Dolphins and were able to pull off their very first win of the season. They would beat the Dolphins 23-20, winning the game off of a last-second field goal from Matthew Wright, his second of the quarter, to give them the lead and eventually the win. Taking a look at how this game went for the Miami Dolphins, their elite starting quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, would throw for 329 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. He also ran for an additional 22 yards. That is 351 total yards of offense. The Dolphins' leading receiver was Mike Gesicki. He had 115 yards on 8 receptions. Their second leading receiver, Jalen Waddle, finished with 70 yards on 10 receptions as he had 2 touchdowns. On the defensive side of the ball, Jerome Baker had 8 tackles for himself. And for the Jacksonville Jaguars, their elite starting quarterback, the number 1 overall pick from the 2021 NFL Draft, Trevor Lawrence, would complete 25 of his 41 passes. He threw for 319 yards and a touchdown. He also ran for 11. That's 330 total yards of offense. The Jaguars' leading rusher was their elite running back, James Robinson. He finished with 73 yards on 17 carries as he had a touchdown. Robinson also had 28 yards through the air on 3 receptions. That would be 101 total yards of offense. The Jaguars' leading receiver was Marvin Jones Jr. He had 100 yards on 7 receptions as he had a touchdown. Their second leading receiver, Jamal Agnew, finished with 78 yards on 5 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball, Damian Wilson finished with 12 tackles, leading the game as Rayshawn Jenkins had 10 of them. The team had no sacks at all, but Nevin Lawson would finish with 5 tackles as he had an interception as well. With this win, the Jacksonville Jaguars are now 1-5. That is the worst record in the AFC South. With this loss, the Miami Dolphins are now 1-5. That is the worst record in the AFC East at the moment. Jumping out to Baltimore, the Baltimore Ravens hosted the LA Chargers, and the Ravens were able to pull away with a 34-6 win to remain undefeated at home. For the LA Chargers, their elite starting quarterback, Justin Herbert, would complete 22 of his 39 passes as he threw for 195 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. He was also the Chargers' leading rusher as he had 12 yards on 2 carries. That is 207 total yards of offense. The chart on the defensive side of the ball, their leading tacklers were Kazir White, Amen Agbangbonimga, and then their elite safety, Derwin James Jr. Additionally, for the Chargers, they would finish with 3 sacks as a team, one of them coming from their elite defensive end, Joey Bosa. Bosa finished with 5 tackles on the day as he had 1 sack. And Kazir White would finish with 2 interceptions to go along with his 8 tackles. For the Baltimore Ravens, their elite starting quarterback, Lamar Jackson, would complete 19 of his 27 passes as he threw for 167 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. He also ran the ball 8 times for 51 yards. That would go down for 218 total yards of offense. The Ravens' leading receiver was Mark Andrews. He had 68 yards on 5 receptions as he had a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Anthony Averett and Josh Bynes would lead the team in tackles as they both had 6 of them. Deshaun Elliott would have the team's only interception. as he had 3 tackles and a sack to go along with it. With this win, the Baltimore Ravens are 5-1. They are 3-0 at home, and they have the best record in the AFC North. With this loss, the LA Chargers are now 4-2. They are 2-1 on the road, and they share the best record in the AFC West with the Las Vegas Raiders at the moment. Jumping out to Charlotte, the Carolina Panthers hosted the Minnesota Vikings. This game would end up in overtime off of a KJ Osborne 27-yard touchdown pass from Kirk Cousins, would give the Vikings their 3rd win of the season. Taking a look at how this game fared for the Carolina Panthers, their starting quarterback, Sam Darnold, would end up throwing for 207 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. He ran for 48 extra yards. That's 255 total yards of offense. Their leading rusher, Chuba Hubbard, finished with 61 yards on 16 carries as he had a touchdown. He also had 4 receiving yards. That's 65 total yards of offense. Their leading receiver was DJ Moore. He had 73 yards on 5 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball for Carolina, Keith Taylor Jr., Jermaine Carter Jr., and Sean Chandler would each finish with 10 tackles, as the team was unable to register a sack. For the Minnesota Vikings, their starting quarterback, Kirk Cousins, would throw for 373 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also ran for 16 yards. That would go down as 389 total yards of offense. Their leading rusher was their elite running back, Dalvin Cook. He finished with 140 yards on 29 carries as he finished with a rushing touchdown. He also had 3 receiving yards through the air on 2 receptions. That's 143 total yards of offense. Their leading receiver was Adam Thielen. He had 126 yards on 11 receptions as he had a touchdown. Their second leading receiver was their elite wide receiver, Justin Jefferson. He had 80 yards on 8 receptions. KJ Osborne would finish with 78 yards on 6 receptions as he had a touchdown. And Tyler Conklin had 71 yards on 3 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball for Minnesota, their leading tackler was their elite safety, Harrison Smith. He would go on to finish with 9 total tackles on the day. And then Brashad Breeland would finish with the only interception for the team, as he was unable to register a tackle. But nonetheless, with this win, the Minnesota Vikings are 3-3. They are 1-2 on the road, and they are tied with the Chicago Bears for the 2nd best record in the NFC North. With this loss, the Carolina Panthers are now 3-3. They are 2-2 at home, and they now hold the 3rd worst record in the NFC South at the moment. Jumping out to Chicago, the Chicago Bears took on their division rivals, the Green Bay Packers. The Packers would end up beating the Bears 24-14, as the Packers are still holding on to the best record in their division. Taking a look at what went down for the Chicago Bears, their elite starting quarterback, Justin Fields, would complete 16 of his 27 passes, throwing for 174 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. He also ran for 43 yards. That's 217 total yards of offense for him. The Bears' leading rusher was Khalil Herbert. Herbert finished with 97 yards on 19 carries as he had a touchdown. He had 15 yards through the air on 12 receptions. That's 112 yards of offense. For the Bears on defense, their leading tackler was Roquan Smith. He had 12 tackles on the day. Their elite defensive end, Khalil Mack, would finish with 4 tackles as he had one of the Bears' 3 sacks. And of course, Akeem Hicks would finish with a tackle and a sack for the Bears as well. For the Green Bay Packers, their goated starting quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, would complete 17 of his 23 passes. He threw for 195 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also ran for 19 yards and an additional touchdown. That is 214 total yards of offense and 3 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was their elite running back, Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones finished with 76 yards on 13 carries. He also had 34 yards on 4 receptions with a touchdown through the air. That is a total of 110 total yards of offense and a touchdown. The Packers' leading receiver was their elite wide receiver, Davante Adams. Davante Adams finished with 89 yards on 4 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball, Devondre Campbell led the team in tackles. Kenny Clark would finish with 3 tackles as he finished with 2 of the team's 4 sacks. And Darnell Savage would finish with 3 tackles along with an interception for the team. With this win, the Green Bay Packers are 5-1. They are 3-1 on the road, and they are currently holding the best record in the NFC North, sitting 2 games ahead of the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears at the moment. With this loss, the Chicago Bears are 3-3. They are 2-1 at home in Soldier Field. and they are now holding the second best record in the NFC North alongside the Minnesota Vikings at the moment. Jumping to the last team in the NFC North, the Detroit Lions hosted the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals would end up beating the Lions 34-11, as all of the Lions' 11 points would be scored in the fourth quarter. Cincinnati would outscore Detroit 10-0 in the first half and 24-11 in the second half. For the Detroit Lions, their starting quarterback Jared Goff would throw for 202 yards and an interception. He also ran for an additional yard, so that's 203 total yards of offense. The Lions' leading receiver was their tight end TJ Hawkinson. He finished with 74 yards on 8 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball, Derek Barnes would lead the team in tackles as he had 9 of them. Amani Oruwariye would finish with the team's only interception as he had 2 tackles as well. For the Cincinnati Bengals, their starting quarterback, Joe Burrow, the number 1 overall pick from the 2020 NFL Draft, would end up throwing for 271 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. He also ran for 20 yards. That's 291 total yards of offense. The Bengals' leading rusher was Joe Mixon. He finished with 94 yards on 18 carries. He also had 59 yards on 5 receptions through the air as he had a touchdown. That is 153 total yards of offense for him. The Bengals' leading receiver was Jamar Chase. He had 97 yards on 4 receptions. The Bengals' leading tackler was Von Bell. He had 7 tackles on the day. Trey Hendrickson logged the team's only interception, and Logan Wilson logged the team's only interception. With this win, the Cincinnati Bengals are 4-2. They are 2-1 on the road, and they hold the second best record in the AFC North, sitting a game behind the Baltimore Ravens. With this loss, the Detroit Lions are now 0-6 at this point in the season. Right now, the Detroit Lions are the only team as of this moment who still have yet to get a win in the NFL. And like I said, they have the worst record in the NFC North. They are 0-3 at home. Jumping out to Indianapolis, the Colts hosted the Houston Texans and were able to pick up their second win of the season. They were able to beat the Texans 31-3. They outscored Houston 10-3 in the first half, and the Colts outscored the Houston Texans 21-0 in the second half. For the Houston Texans, their starting quarterback Davis Mills threw for 243 yards and 2 interceptions. He also ran for 5 yards. That's 248 total yards of offense. The Texans' leading rusher was Mark Ingram II. He finished with 73 yards on 18 carries. He had 8 yards through the air. That's 81 total yards of offense. The Texans' leading receiver was Brandon Cooks. He had 89 yards off of 9 receptions. Their leading tackler was Kamu Grugier-Hill. He had 7 tackles on the day. Jonathan Greenard finished with 6 tackles, and he had 2 sacks on the day, both of the Texans' sacks. And for the Indianapolis Colts, their starting quarterback Carson Wentz threw for 223 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also ran for an additional yard. That's 224 total yards of offense. The Colts' leading rusher was Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin. He finished with 145 yards on 14 carries and with 2 touchdowns on the ground. He also for the Colts, their leading receiver was T.Y. Hilton. He had 80 yards on 4 receptions. Going back to Jonathan Taylor, he had 13 yards through the air. That's 158 total yards of offense with his 2 rushing touchdowns. On the defensive side of the ball for the Colts, Bobby Okereke would finish with the most tackles. He had 14 of them. Kenny Moore II would have 10 of them. Isaiah Rodgers would finish with an interception for himself. And then for the Colts, their elite linebacker Darius Leonard finished with 7 tackles and an interception. With this win, the Indianapolis Colts are 2-4. That is the second best record in the AFC South, as they are 2 games behind the Tennessee Titans. With this loss, the Houston Texans are 1-5. They are tied with the Jacksonville Jaguars for the worst record in the division. Jumping out to New York City, the New York Giants hosted the LA Rams. The Rams were able to beat the Giants 38-11. The Giants were able to score the first field goal of the game, holding the Rams scoreless in the first quarter. The Rams would outscore the Giants 28-3 in the first half, as all 4 of their touchdowns in the first half came in the second quarter. And then the Rams would outscore the Giants 10-8 in the second half. For the New York Giants, their starting quarterback out of my Duke, Daniel Jones, would throw for 242 yards and 3 interceptions receptions. He also ran for 4 yards on the ground. That's 246 total yards of offense. The Giants' leading receiver was Sterling Shepard. He finished with 76 yards on 10 receptions. The Giants' leading tackler was Tay Crowder. He had 10 of them on the day. Leonard Williams out of USC would finish with 7 tackles and a sack and a half out of the Giants' 2 total sacks on the day. And Xavier McKinney would finish with 3 tackles as he had 2 interceptions for the Giants, or in their secondary. For the Los Angeles Rams, their starting quarterback, Matthew Stafford, would throw for 251 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick. He also ran for 12 yards. That's 263 total yards of offense. The Rams' leading rusher was Darrell Henderson Jr. He had 78 yards on 21 carries as he had a touchdown. He also had 29 yards on 2 receptions. He had a receiving touchdown as well. That is 107 total yards of offense from Darrell Henderson Jr., along with his 2 touchdowns. Their leading receiver was Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp would finish with 130 yards on 9 receptions. He finished with 2 receiving touchdowns on the day. On the defensive side of the ball, Jordan Fuller would finish with 11 tackles. Taylor Rapp would finish with 5 tackles and 2 interceptions. Robert Rochelle would finish with an interception as well. Leonard Floyd would finish with 2 tackles as he finished with a sack and a half as well as a fumble recovery. With this win, the Los Angeles Rams are 5-1. That is the second best record in the NFC West, as they are currently still sitting behind the undefeated Arizona Cardinals. With this loss, the New York Giants are now 1-5. They currently hold the worst record in the NFC East, and they still have yet to win a game at home. Jumping out to our nation's capital, the Washington football team hosted the reigning AFC champs, Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs would end up beating the Washington football team 31-13. Washington outscored Kansas City 13-10 in the first half, but then the Chiefs would shut the Washington football team out in the second half, outscoring them 21-10. For the Washington football team, their starting quarterback, Taylor Heineke, would throw for 182 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. The Washington football team's leading receiver was J.D. McKissick. He finished with 65 yards on 8 receptions for the day. On the defensive side of the ball, Jamin Davis would finish with 11 tackles. Cole Holcomb finished with 10 tackles as he had a sack for himself. And then then also in the secondary, Bobby McCain would finish with 5 tackles and an interception. Kendall Fuller would finish with an interception to go along with his 7 tackles. And then for the Kansas City Chiefs, their elite starting quarterback, the $500 million man, Patrick Mahomes, would complete 32 of his 47 passes. He threw for 397 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. He would also run for 31 yards on 3 carries. That is 428 total yards of offense. The Chiefs' leading rusher was Darrell Williams. He had 62 yards on 21 carries as he had 2 rushing touchdowns for the day. He had 3 receptions for 27 total receiving yards. That would be 89 total yards of offense. The Chiefs' leading receiver was their elite tight end, Travis Kelce. He had 99 receiving yards on 8 receptions. Their elite wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, had 9 receptions for 76 receiving yards, and he had a receiving touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Nick Bolton would lead the team in tackles as he had 9 of them. L'Jarius Sneed finished with 4 tackles and a fumble recovery. Tershawn Wharton would finish with an interception to go along with his only tackle. With this win, the Kansas City Chiefs are 3-3. They are 2-1 on the road, and they are tied with the Denver Broncos for the worst record in the AFC West. With this loss, the Washington football team is now 2-4. They are tied with the Philadelphia Eagles for the second best record in the NFC East as they sit 3 games behind the Dallas Cowboys. Jumping out to Cleveland, the Cleveland Browns hosted the Arizona Cardinals, and in this matchup, the Cardinals were able to get the best of the Cleveland Browns to remain undefeated. The Cardinals would outscore the Cleveland Browns 23-14 in the first half, and then they would outscore the Cleveland Browns 14-0 in the second half in order to win this matchup. For the Cleveland Browns, their starting quarterback, Baker Mayfield, would throw for 234 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. The number 1 overall pick, I want to say, from the 2018 NFL draft. For the Browns, their leading rusher, Kareem Hunt, would finish with 66 yards on 14 carries. He had 12 yards on 3 receptions, so that's 78 total yards of offense. The Browns' leading receiver was Donovan Peoples-Jones. He had 101 yards on 4 receptions as he had 2 touchdowns. Their second leading receiver was Odell Beckham Jr. He had 5 receptions for 79 yards. On the defensive side of the ball, Anthony Walker would finish with 9 tackles. Their elite defensive end, Myles Garrett, would finish with 3 tackles and a sack. Their other elite defensive end, Jadeveon Clowney, would finish with 4 tackles and a sack for himself. They would have both of the Browns' sacks. Looking at how the Arizona Cardinals fared, their elite starting quarterback, Kyler Murray, would complete 20 of his 30 passes. He threw for 229 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also ran for 6 yards, so that's 235 total yards of offense. The Cardinals' leading receiver was A.J. Green. He had 79 yards on 5 receptions as he had a touchdown. Their second leading receiver, Christian Kirk, had 75 yards on 5 receptions as he had a touchdown. Their elite wide receiver, DeAndre Hopkins, would finish with 55 yards on 3 receptions as 2 of his 3 receptions were touchdowns. On the defensive side of the ball, Isaiah Simmons, Byron Murphy Jr., Jalen Thompson, and Jordan Hicks would lead the team in tackles as they each had 2 of them. Jordan Hicks would finish with 2 sacks, as those were 2 of his 6 tackles. Their go-to defensive end, J.J. Watt, would finish with 5 tackles as he had a sack. Marcus Golden had 5 tackles as he had 2 sacks. Those 3 players would combine for the 5 sacks that the Cardinals had as a team. Robert Alford finished with a 23-yard interception return. And with this win, the Arizona Cardinals are now 6-0. They are the only remaining undefeated team left in the NFL at this very moment in time. So they're right now holding on to that number 1 seed, and they hold the best record in the NFC West. They are 4-0 on the road. With this loss, the Cleveland Browns are 3-3. They are 2-1 in Cleveland, and alongside the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are holding the worst record in the AFC North at the moment. Jumping to the Mile High City, the Denver Broncos hosted the Las Vegas Raiders from within their division. The Raiders would end up beating the Broncos 34-24. The difference would come in the first half, where the Raiders outscored the Broncos 17-7, as in the second half, both teams were pretty even at 17. For the Denver Broncos in this matchup, their starting quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater, would throw for 334 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 3 picks. He also ran for 9 yards on the ground. That's 343 total yards of offense for Teddy Bridgewater. Their leading rusher, Javonte Williams, finished with 53 yards on 11 carries. He had 15 yards through the air. That's 68 total yards of offense. Their second leading rusher, Melvin Gordon III, had 50 yards on 10 carries. He had 23 yards on 3 receptions. That gave him 73 total yards of offense. The Broncos' leading receiver was their tight end, Noah Fant, out of Iowa. He finished with 97 yards on 9 receptions as he finished with a touchdown. Their second leading receiver, Courtland Sutton, finished with 94 yards on 8 receptions as he had a touchdown as well. On the defensive side of the ball, Kareem Jackson would lead the team in tackles as he had 6 tackles. One of his 6 tackles was a sack, one of the team's 2 sacks. And for the Las Vegas Raiders, their starting quarterback, Derek Carr, would throw for 341 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Raiders' leading rusher was their elite running back, Josh Jacobs. He had 53 yards on 16 carries as he had a touchdown. He also had 29 yards through the air on 1 reception. That's 82 total yards of offense. The Raiders' leading receiver was Henry Ruggs III. He had 3 receptions for 97 yards as he had a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Denzel Perryman finished with 12 tackles. Corey Littleton and Nate Hobbs would finish with 11 tackles each. Max Crosby would finish with 6 tackles for the team as he recorded 3 sacks, 3 of the team's 5. Trayvon Moehrig, Jonathan Abram, and Brandy Fasison would finish with the team's 3 interceptions. With this win, the Las Vegas Raiders are now 4-2. They are tied with the Los Angeles Chargers for the best record in the AFC West. With this loss, the Denver Broncos are now 3-3. They are 1-2 while playing at home, and they are tied with the Kansas City Chiefs for the worst record in the AFC West at 3-3. Jumping out to Boston, the New England Patriots hosted America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. And in a game that would end up going to overtime, the Dallas Cowboys would end up having to beat the Patriots 35-29, thanks to a 35-yard touchdown pass from Dak Prescott to CeeDee Lamb. Going back into how this game fared for the New England Patriots, their first-round draft pick, starting quarterback Mac Jones, would throw for 229 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. The Patriots' leading rusher was Damian Harris. He had 101 yards on 18 carries and a touchdown. And then he would finish, and he also had 7 receiving yards through the air, so it's 108 total yards of offense. The Patriots' leading receiver was Kendrick Bourne. He had 75 receiving yards off of 1 reception, and of course, that 75-yard reception was a touchdown. In the Patriots' defense, Jawan Bentley would lead the team in tackles. He had 13 of them as the Patriots were unable to record a sack. Kyle Duggar would record an interception to go along with his 8 tackles. For the Dallas Cowboys, their starting quarterback, Dak Prescott, would throw for 445 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. He also ran for 10 yards. That's 455 total yards of offense. The Cowboys' leading rusher was their elite running back, Ezekiel Elliott. He had 69 yards on 17 carries. He also had 50 yards on 7 receptions. That is 119 total yards of offense for him. The Cowboys' leading receiver was CeeDee Lamb. He had 149 yards on 9 receptions, including 2 touchdowns, one of them being the game-winning touchdown. The Cowboys' second leading receiver was Dalton Schultz. He had 79 yards on 5 receptions for the day. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Micah Parsons finished with 6 tackles on the day. And then Trayvon Diggs would finish with 5 tackles, including a 42-yard pick 6. Of course, he holds the league lead in interceptions. With this win, the Dallas Cowboys are now 5-1. That is the best record in the NFC East at the moment, as they sit 3 games ahead of the Washington football team and the Philadelphia Eagles. They are 2-1 on the road. With this loss, the New England Patriots are 2-4. They are 0-4 in Gillette Stadium this season. As of right now, they are holding the second best record in the AFC East, as they sit 2 games behind the Buffalo Bills. Taking a look at what was going on for the primetime matchup, the Pittsburgh Steelers hosted the Seattle Seahawks, and the Pittsburgh Steelers would beat the Seahawks 23-20 thanks to a 37-yard field goal from Chris Boswell at the end of the game, even though the Seahawks kicked a field goal at the end of regulation to essentially tie the game. For the Seattle Seahawks in this matchup, their starting quarterback Geno Smith would throw for 209 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Alex Collins. He had 101 yards on 20 carries as he had a rushing touchdown. The Seahawks' leading receiver was DK Metcalf. Their elite wide receiver had 58 yards on 6 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball, their elite linebacker would tie for the team high in tackles as he had 14. Jordan Brooks would also finish with 14 tackles as well. And then for the Pittsburgh Steelers, their elite starting quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger, would complete 29 of his 40 passes, throwing for 229 yards as he threw a touchdown. The Steelers' leading rusher was Najee Harris out of Alabama. He finished with 81 yards on 24 carries. He also had 46 yards on 6 receptions, including a touchdown. He would finish with 127 total yards of offense for the Steelers. On the Steelers' defensive side of the ball, Minkah Fitzpatrick, their elite safety, and Cameron Hayward, their elite defensive tackle, would tie for the team high in tackles. They both had 9 of them. Cameron Hayward would also add a sack and 2 tackles for a loss. TJ Watt, their elite outside linebacker, would finish with 7 tackles as he had 2 sacks and 3 tackles for loss. Alex Highsmith would finish with 7 tackles as he finished with a sack and a half. The Steelers would finish with 5 total sacks as a team, and with this win, the Pittsburgh Steelers are 3-3. They are 2-2 at home as they are tied with the Cleveland Browns for the worst record in the AFC North. With this loss, the Seattle Seahawks are 2-4. They are 2-2 on the road, and they are currently 2-2. They are currently holding the worst record in the NFC West at the moment. So that is what was going on with yesterday's big matchups. Taking a look at what's going on today for Monday Night Football, the Tennessee Titans will host the Buffalo Bills. The Tennessee Titans coming into this matchup 3-2. The Buffalo Bills coming in 4-1. This will be a highly anticipated matchup as many people are looking forward to what's going on. And of course, last but not least, staying within the topic of football, leaving the continent, looking at what's going on with Europe, Tottenham Hotspur was able to beat Newcastle 3-2, as their second goal will come from their elite English forward Harry Kane. And of course, Son Heung-min would finish with the third goal to finish out the first half. Big points for Tottenham, as right now they are sitting fifth in the table at the moment. In La Liga, Barcelona was able to beat Valencia 3-1. Their first goal would come from Ansu Fati to even the game up. Their second goal would come off a penalty from Memphis Depay. And then their 85th minute goal from Philippe Coutinho would be what they needed to advance. Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid's games both got postponed. But of course, looking at how this game affects La Liga specifically, Barcelona is moving up the table, especially with this win. In the German Bundesliga, the reigning Bundesliga champs Bayern Munich were able to beat Bayer Leverkusen 5-1. As going into this matchup, these were the two top teams in the Bundesliga. Bayern Munich would see 2 goals come from their elite Polish striker Robert Lewandowski. They would see a goal come from their goated center attacking mid from Germany, Thomas Müller, and then Serge Gnabry, their elite winger, would finish with 2 goals for himself. All 5 of their goals coming in the first half. A big win. And then in Serie A, Napoli was able to beat Torino, and with this win over Torino, it looks as though Napoli is still undefeated. They're the only team remaining in the top 5 leagues that have won all of their domestic games so far. And Moise Kean was able to beat Moise Kean and Juventus were able to beat Roma 1-0. Their only goal coming from Kean in the 16th minute. That's virtually what was going on with soccer yesterday, as today there's really just the Arsenal Crystal Palace game to look forward to. With that said, that's virtually everything that I've got going for you for today, Monday, October 18th, 2021. I want to thank everyone for listening to all 36 minutes of this piece. I want to thank the WNBA, the MLB, and the college football, NFL, and just FIFA websites for giving me what I needed. And of course, I apologize if I butchered the names. I do plan on getting them right eventually. I will follow this up with a championship profile for the Chicago Sky, because congratulations to them for winning. An entire season is over. And just like that, we are getting ready for basketball, as the NBA is just around the corner. Thanks for listening to this piece. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with more tomorrow. Peace out.